Hi there, welcome to Module 6. So I just wanted to take a quick moment and walk through or talk through some of the requirements for Module 6 before you get too far into it. And so I will be, don't worry about this grade book up here. I will be getting to those, I promise. I just takes me a little bit of time to give the feedback that I try to give you. I figure if you're going to spend the time submitting really quality assignments, the least I can do is spend as much time as possible giving you feedback. So it takes me a little bit of time to get through everything. Okay, so Module 6 is about disability and healthcare. So this week, your module tasks and materials are related to how people with disabilities experience the healthcare system and some of the challenges. So the objectives are for you to describe how models and stereotypes of disability influence healthcare policies and practices. So one of the things I want you to be thinking about is like, how does the medical model of disability actually influence medical practices and medical policies? And then think about how the intersection of disability with other marginalized identities influences access to healthcare. For example, women experience healthcare very differently than men. And so imagine if you're a disabled woman, what that experience is like, or if you're a disabled woman of color, what that experience looks like. And then you should be able to explain how disabled healthcare professionals themselves experience structural ableism in the workplace. So how many of you actually have doctors or counselors or therapists that are disabled themselves? And if you don't have a doctor that's disabled themselves, let's think about why that might be. So you're going to read about ableism in healthcare. There's nothing in our textbook this week, so this is a separate topic. So you'll read about ableism in healthcare, ableism and structural ableism in healthcare workplaces. I want you to watch the Doctors, Disabled Patients, and Ableism, and then listen to one of these 3 podcasts. So this week you were supposed to have a blog due, but I took it off because I know that you're going to meet with your live small groups to have a discussion, and you also have the Real Disabilities rough draft due. So I'm not going to have you do a blog on top of all that. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to do all of the readings and everything. It's super important for you to do the readings because you're going to need this information when you take the final exam. So be thoughtful about that. So here's your 2 articles. I added this quick Instagram post because I thought it was really interesting. So it's from a disabled person's perspective. So take a minute to read or listen to that too. Because it's really interesting I think it's always good to hear from other disabled people, like what their experiences are. And then you're going to watch here this video about doctors, disabled patients, and ableism, and then choose one of the podcasts, hyperlink below. Okay, so that's your work for this week. Now remember, I really want you to focus on getting your Real Disabilities rough draft in and make sure you're doing your live small group discussion. And so you will find your live small group discussion prep here. This should be done before you meet. So I want you to really be prepared to talk about how models and stereotypes of disability and ableism show up in employment policies and practices, how they show up in healthcare policies and practices, and then think about specific education policies you've experienced in college and explain how some of them could be considered ableist. So think about attendance policies, participation requirements, etc. And then how might knowing this change the way that you think about or respond in your job, in healthcare, and in college? Okay, so think about those things and be prepared to discuss them with your live small group if you haven't done so already. And then your Real Disabilities rough draft is due. And so what I want you to do, you don't have to have the whole thing completed, but I really need you to submit at least a pretty structured outline of what you plan to cover, what content you plan to cover within those sections, your sources that you're using for those sections, and then share 3 specific areas where you want me to focus my feedback. So do you want my feedback on grammar, spelling, citations, or do you want me to focus my feedback on the content of your project? Is there a particular area where you're not really sure if the example is stereotypical, or if the example is aligned with a different, a specific model? Like, be really specific about where you need my feedback so that I can do that first. And so any of you can run your papers through an AI platform and ask it to edit it for spelling and sentence structure and grammar. So you don't really need me to do that, but I can if that's what you, if that's how you would like me to spend my time on your project. Otherwise, be really specific about where you need my help and where you need my feedback when you submit your rough draft. So hopefully this is helpful this week. I'm going to take us back up to the Real Disabilities Project just to remind you where to find everything. So here are the instructions and guidelines, and hopefully you've been working on this as you've been going, because it's so hard to put this all together at once, especially because you have to watch 2 films. So here's what your paper has to include. So all of these sections. And so I just want to make sure that you have all of the information that you need. And there's videos below if you need help with citations. So yeah, so don't forget, I'm really excited to read your Rotten Tomatoes review. Don't forget to add that to the end of your paper. So, and again, I do want to clarify that you're comparing 2 films, kind of comparing them. Basically, what you're doing is talking about how disability was represented in both films. So you can compare them side by side in that, let's say the first section you're going to cover is disability representation. So maybe you do, you talk about it as a whole, right? And then you could talk just a quick sentence about, do you think that disability representation was authentic in both of those films? Then when you get down to the stereotypes and archetypes, where you're actually analyzing whether the films appear to be influenced by particular models, you can do, you can give an example for one of your films, and then the next paragraph you can give an example of the second film. Or you could do the entire analysis of one film and then switch to the second film. So it really just depends on like how your brain processes this information best. You can set it up in whichever way makes the most sense for you. But at the end, you're actually going to do a Rotten Tomatoes review of both films. And so thinking about, is it 88%? Is it 100%? And give a really good explanation as to why you scored it that way. So hopefully this helps. If you have questions, as always, you can email me. You can set up a meeting with me. Yeah, so just let me know. But hopefully not having that blog post this week gives you a minute to breathe. I know this class has had a lot of content in it, and I know that. And I really commend you for sticking with it and getting everything done. I know it's a lot. And so there's so much to cover with disability. It's hard to make it fit into 8 weeks. So anyway, I hope not having the blog kind of gives you a little bit of a breather so that you can focus on the other 2 major assignments this week. So again, have a great week and let me know if you need anything at all.